At the beginning of the story, our bottom male lead, Lee Chae-ha, tells us that three things are buried deep inside the mines: ore, money, and people. A black coffin lies hidden beneath layers of coal, while a beautiful paradise is built on top of it. Bright lights blind everyone from the truth, and from below, all he can see are people's feet. Just when he believes the worst is finally over, someone makes him an offer he simply can't refuse. The scene then shifts to the prosecutor's office, where a completely drunk woman suddenly storms inside, screaming for Lee Chae-ha. Lee calmly stands up and says he's right there. Without warning, she throws a pile of cash into his face and orders him to pick it up. As he bends down, she pours wine all over his head and laughs cruelly. She warns him that if she doesn't get a phone call by tomorrow, making him disappear will only take a second. Before leaving, she insults the section chief for not training his employees properly. After she walks out, one of Lee's co-workers explains that she's the youngest daughter of the powerful Wusong group and even runs one of their casinos, so everyone lets her get away with anything. He tells Lee to earn a promotion as quickly as possible if he wants to stop dealing with spoiled rich people like her. Later, everyone heads out for lunch, and Lee nearly bumps into Prosecutor Ju Tae-sun, our top male lead. Tae-sun asks if Lee is on duty today, and Lee says yes because they're going to inspect an autopsy. Tae-sun simply replies that he'll see him later before walking away. As soon as he's gone, Lee's coworker warns him that today's assignment is with Prosecutor Ju, calling him a complete psycho. He explains that despite his handsome face, Ju never smiles, gets angry, or even show emotion. All he cares about is work, and anyone assigned to him ends up buried under endless paperwork. Surprisingly, Lee defends him, saying a good prosecutor only needs to do the job correctly, and that everyone has their own style. His coworker is shocked and asks if they're close, but Lee says he simply respects him. That night, after returning home, Lee takes his medicine and falls asleep. He has another terrifying nightmare of a man brutally beating someone while insisting he didn't commit murder. Lee wakes up in panic, but before he can recover, he receives a call about a newly discovered dead body. He immediately heads to the crime scene with Prosecutor Ju. A police officer explains that the victim had just returned from Russia the day before. At first glance, it looks like he drank himself to death. The officer also says drug use has increased dramatically ever since the nearby casino opened. However, Prosecutor Ju carefully examines the body and points out that although the victim suffered a knife wound after slipping and accidentally injected himself in the neck, none of that proves the exact cause of death. Lee discovers plastic hidden inside the victim's mouth, along with multiple needle marks across his body. He guesses the victim probably came to buy drugs and died from an overdose while high. Prosecutor Ju immediately shuts that theory down, saying traveling all the way from Russia just to buy drugs doesn't make much sense. He reminds Lee that opinions don't solve cases, because only evidence and facts matter. While investigating, Lee notices a mysterious man wearing a black cap and face mask quietly watching everything from behind the reporters before disappearing. Later that evening, Prosecutor Ju invites Lee to dinner and asks whether the victim died accidentally or was murdered. Lee still thinks it was a drug overdose, but Ju says they'll wait for the autopsy report before reaching any conclusions. During dinner, Ju learns that Lee used to be a police officer. When asked why he quit despite graduating from the police academy, Lee simply says he wanted a fresh start. Ju says someone with Lee's background could have become a high-ranking officer, but Lee insists he has no regrets. After dinner, Ju drives him home, and Lee admits he's admired him ever since reading about him in college. Ju responds that he doesn't deserve such respect. Then his expression turns cold, as he says every time he sees a murderer, he wants to kill him himself, which is exactly why he became a prosecutor, to legally send murderers to their deaths. Hearing those words triggers painful memories inside Lee. He remembers his father desperately insisting he never killed anyone. The next morning, Lee arrives at work only to discover everyone is staring at him because he's unexpectedly been promoted to grade 8. Completely confused, he confronts Prosecutor Ju and asks why this happened. Ju reminds him that he once said he wanted to work with him. Then, with a chilling smile, he slowly steps closer and quietly whispers the words that leave Lee frozen in shock. "Lee, don't you know you're the son of a murderer?" Lee can't stop thinking about Prosecutor Ju's cruel words. Ever since he was a child, people have never called him by his own name. To everyone, he has always been known as nothing more than the son of a murderer. Even so, Lee has spent his entire life staying strong, believing that no matter what people said, they could never break him. Back in the present, Prosecutor Ju asks him if he really is Gileong's son, the man accused of murdering Wusong. Lee immediately steps back and firmly says he is nothing like his father and never wants to be compared to him. Ju then asks whether someone with that background is truly capable of working beside him, before unexpectedly offering Lee a position on his investigation team. The next day, Lee accepts the offer and moves into Ju's office. There, he meets a cheerful coworker named Hanul, who warmly welcomes him and helps him organize his things. Hanul tells Lee not to be afraid of Prosecutor Ju, because although Ju is completely obsessed with work, he genuinely cares about his team. He explains that Ju may be strict and harsh, but he always separates work from his personal feelings. Hanul also discovers they both live in the staff dormitory on the 5th floor, though they somehow never crossed paths before. When Hanul insists on carrying Lee's luggage, the two briefly struggle over the bag until Prosecutor Ju suddenly walks in. Seeing them together, Ju calmly tells Lee to come into his office and prepare the investigation report. Inside, Lee carefully explains everything they know about the victim. The autopsy confirms the victim died from a drug overdose, but investigators also found plastic hidden inside his mouth and unexplained injuries in his esophagus. Since there are no security cameras or witnesses, the case seems almost impossible to solve. Lee believes the criminals deliberately chose that location because they already knew there were no cameras around the casino. Prosecutor Ju suggests someone must have directed the victim there in advance. Lee then shares an unusual theory. He explains that in the past, international drug smugglers sometimes hid narcotics inside dead bodies for transport across borders. Similar victims were also found with plastic hidden inside their mouths after a package accidentally burst. However, Lee points out one important difference. If the victim had simply overdosed while smuggling drugs, his phone should still have been with him, yet it completely disappeared. That makes Lee believe someone moved the body after death and removed the phone. He also mentions that investigators found a glove nearby that doesn't even contain the victim's DNA, suggesting it may actually belong to the killer who accidentally dropped it while dumping the body during heavy rain. Prosecutor Ju sarcastically asks Lee if he thinks he has solved the entire case already. He even presses a pen against Lee's neck and questions the injection mark found on the victim. Lee calmly answers that the victim may have injected himself while hallucinating under the influence of drugs. Ju coldly says he simply can't speak politely to the son of a murderer. Their conversation is interrupted when a crying mother rushes into the office, insisting that her son could never commit such a crime because he had always been kind and gentle. Her words remind Lee of everything people once said about his own father. Prosecutor Ju remains completely emotionless, asking Hanul to escort the woman outside before reminding Lee that prosecutors cannot allow sympathy to cloud their judgment because every murderer deserves the harshest punishment. Later, Hanul suggests celebrating Lee's arrival with dinner. At first, Ju ignores the idea, but moments later he quietly returns wearing his coat and agrees to join them. During dinner, Hanul gets completely drunk and tricks Lee into eating a piece of onion by telling him it is meat. When Lee realizes the prank, Prosecutor Ju uses it as a lesson, explaining that no matter how much sauce covers an onion, it can never become meat. In the same way, people cannot easily hide who they really are. Hanul jokes that everyone has something they want to hide, and the three raise their glasses together. After Hanul falls asleep at the table, Ju intentionally spills Lee's drink while pouring another glass. Lee catches it anyway and finally asks whether Ju truly dislikes him. Ju asks if Lee wants his approval. Lee says no. He only wants to be treated fairly as Investigator Lee instead of being judged for his family. Ju replies that he will decide that himself, not the son of a murderer. Lee confidently promises to prove himself through his work. Ju admits he expected Lee to run away, but says he has more courage than he expected. Later, Lee accidentally brushes Ju's foot under the table and awkwardly steps outside. When he returns, he finds Ju waiting outside. Lee explains he went to buy ice cream. Ju says he will take Hanul home before returning to the office because he still has work to finish. As he notices Lee's hands freezing in the cold, he quietly removes his own gloves and hands them to him without saying much. That night, while Lee is eating ice cream at home, the doorbell rings. He is surprised to find Prosecutor Ju standing outside carrying a large stack of case files. Ju notices Lee's sleeping pills on the table, but says nothing. Instead, he orders Lee to read every similar case from the past year and prepare a complete report within 1 week. Shocked by the impossible deadline, Lee asks if Ju is serious. Ju simply asks if he can't do it. Determined to prove himself, Lee confidently accepts the challenge. While Lee continues eating his ice cream, Ju casually takes his spoon, tastes some himself. When Lee asks why he was chosen for the assignment, Lee reminds him that once Lee said he admired him. Hearing that, Ju's mood suddenly changes.
He says the thought of being admired by the son of a murderer fills him with disgust. In the tense confrontation, Ju forcefully kisses Lee. Lee pulls away, his lips bleeding, and asks why Ju hate him so much. Ju coldly replies that even hearing his name disgusts him. When Lee asks why Ju keeps acting this way if he truly hates him, Ju gives a chilling answer. Whatever he chooses to do, Lee will simply have to accept it.
Lee refuses to back down. He tells Prosecutor Ju that even if he's the son of a murderer, he's still his own person and has no intention of running away. Ju asks why he's still here, and Lee calmly replies that he's an investigator, not a prosecutor, so he has no reason to quit. Frustrated, Ju grabs Lee's wrist and warns him that if he stays, Ju will do whatever he wants to him. Without hesitation, Lee accepts the challenge. He says Ju is free to fire him like everyone else has, but he'll never resign on his own. Ju smirks and says he's curious to see which one of them will give up first. He also says he doesn't want respect from the son of a murderer because it only disgusts him. Before leaving, Ju reminds Lee that he has 1 week to finish reading all the case files. The next day, Ju visits a grave of a woman named Soyeon and remembers working with her in 2020 on the Woo-song murder case. During the investigation, Soyeon explained that the casino case was becoming more suspicious because Woo-song had visited the casino before his death and even won a huge jackpot. She also revealed that Woo-song was once the casino's original owner. Although Gi-leong, Lee's father, was officially named the killer, Soyeon wasn't convinced. She had read Lee's childhood diary where he wrote that his father received a 1 million bonus from Woo-song and happily came home saying they had become close friends. Lee even dreamed of becoming friends with Woo-song one day. Soyeon also pointed out that Gi-leong had already won a 3 million lottery before the murder, making money an unlikely motive. She believed someone else was secretly manipulating everything to take over the casino and asked Ju to help her meet both Lee and Woo-song's son. Ju agreed, but before they could continue, Soyeon suddenly died, leaving the truth buried with her. Back in the present, Ju meets Director Tak at the cemetery, who quietly says painful memories should be forgotten before they destroy the present. Meanwhile, Lee returns to work, where his former coworkers openly show their jealousy over his promotion. One of them even steps on his foot on purpose. Ju notices everything and later calls Lee into his office. Lee submits the report Ju assigned, and Ju admits he's impressed by the quality of Lee's work. They begin discussing another old case that closely resembles the Woo-song murder. Ju believes the suspect should have faced murder charges instead of assault, but Lee explains the victim's own testimony supported the original ruling. Ju then says Lee will likely be transferred back to his old department. Instead of arguing, Lee presents a different theory, suggesting the real murder weapon may have been hidden. As they analyze the evidence together, memories of Lee's father flood back, making his hands shake uncontrollably. Ju notices and quietly tells him to leave. Outside, Lee's abusive uncle suddenly appears, searching through his belongings and mocking him for becoming an important investigator. He cruelly asks whether everyone knows Lee is the son of a murderer. Lee realizes his uncle only wants money and promises to send it later. When the uncle raises his hand as if to hit him, Ju notices but stays silent. The uncle warns Lee never to ignore his calls before leaving. Soon after, an angry police officer calls Lee, accusing him of questioning the investigation. Lee calmly explains he only requested another blood test and the missing CCTV footage. Ju takes the phone and immediately puts the officer in his place, reminding him that asking for more evidence is part of the job. The officer quickly apologizes and agrees to send everything. Later, while reviewing CCTV footage, the arrogant casino director causes chaos at the police station. Ju immediately orders forensic blood tests because he suspects drugs are involved. Hanel explains that many officers have been bribed by the casino, so Ju decides to keep the investigation secret. After Hanel leaves, Lee suggests testing the casino owner's blood, believing it could prove the victim, Kim, worked for her. Ju tells Lee to forget the current case because he has something more important. Desperate for another chance, Lee begs to stay, and Ju finally agrees. However, instead of giving him a new assignment, Ju hands him the old Woo-song murder file. He explains the case was closed after Gi-leong died in prison before the trial ended, even though his own son never believed he was guilty. Ju throws old photographs of Woo-song and Gi-leong on the table and orders Lee to personally reopen the investigation. Holding the pictures of his father, Lee silently promises himself that he'll uncover the truth and finally prove that neither he nor his father is the monster everyone believes them to be. The story then jumps back to 2001. A young boy is asleep when Gi-leong arrives home carrying a heavily drunk Woo-song. As he helps him onto the bed, Gi-leong complains that if Woo-song can't handle alcohol, he should stop drinking so much before quietly leaving the house. A short time later, the doorbell rings again. The boy stays asleep while someone enters the house and silently leaves a few moments later. The next morning, the child wakes up and walks outside, only to find Wu Song lying dead on the floor. Terrified, he immediately calls for help, but soon afterward, Gil-young is arrested for Wu Song's murder. Reporters flood the scene, announcing that Gil-young's son, Lee, refuses to believe his father is guilty and keeps insisting that his dad is innocent. Watching those reports is another young boy filled with grief and anger. At that moment, he decides to become a prosecutor so he can uncover the truth behind his father's death. Years later, after working incredibly hard, that boy becomes prosecutor Ju Tae-sun. The shocking truth is finally revealed. Ju is actually Wu Song's son. This explains why he has always treated Lee so harshly. When Lee later joins the prosecutor's office as an investigator, Ju realizes fate has brought the son of his father's alleged killer directly to him. Promoting Lee to grade 8 was never an accident. It was all part of Ju's plan to reopen the old murder case and finally uncover the real truth. When Lee learns this, he storms out in anger, but Ju quickly follows him. Lee accuses Ju of using his father's name to manipulate him and reopen wounds that should have stayed buried. He says everyone has judged him his entire life because of his father's past, and he refuses to be used again. Surprisingly, Ju admits that seeing Lee suffer doesn't make him happy. Instead, it hurts him too. He explains that assumptions and facts are completely different, and he needs someone with Lee's investigative skills to discover what really happened that day. Lee hesitates because investigating his own father's case feels impossible, but Ju reminds him that only the truth can clear both of them. When Lee asked why he's desperate about this case, Ju says he only wants to know the truth. Also says that no matter how painful the answer may be, it's the only way for Lee to finally escape the label of being a murderer's son. Hearing those words, Lee breaks down in tears. Ju gently tells him to stop crying, go home, and rest. The following morning, Lee arrives at the office early and notices one of Ju's finger sleeves lying on the desk. Smiling, he secretly tries it on, hoping it will make him as capable as Ju. Unfortunately, Ju walks in and catches him. Embarrassed, he asks if he can keep it. Ju first refuses, then hands him another one instead, telling Lee that he's not as heartless as people think, and that one day Lee might even surpass him. Encouraged by those words, Lee happily follows Ju to investigate another murder case. At the crime scene, they discover a victim covered with multiple knife wounds. Ju believes there was no struggle, while Lee thinks the victim was attacked while sleeping or too drunk to defend himself. Outside, the victim's wife tearfully accuses another man of committing the murder. Ju and Lee question nearby shop owners and learn that the suspect often came to sharpen knives after being released from prison, but nobody has anything suspicious about the victim's wife. Later, while discussing the case over dinner, Lee points out that the victim probably trusted the killer. Ju admits he has also started suspecting the wife because of her unusual behavior. As they continue gathering evidence, they find CCTV footage that strengthens their suspicions, but Ju refuses to make an arrest without stronger proof. While reviewing more recordings, they're stunned to see Kim, the man who was supposedly dead, appearing on camera. Before they can investigate further, Ju invites them to dinner, but Ju says they'll go later because they still have work to finish. After Hanul leaves, Ju quietly warns Lee not to trust anyone except him. That evening, Ju takes Lee out for drinks. Lee quickly gets drunk, and Ju reveals that he already knows about Lee's painful childhood, including losing his mother, suffering abuse from his uncle, and joining the police just to escape that life. Lee is surprised by how much Ju knows, but honestly admits it's all true. Later, Lee stands up to leave but grabs a few carrots from the table, joking that they're his. As he walks away, Ju grabs the back of his coat and scolds him. Lee laughs, gently touches Ju's face, and says he's acting just like Prosecutor Ju. Realizing Lee is completely drunk, Ju decides to take him home. He carefully supports him the entire way so he doesn't fall. Their faces move closer, and overwhelmed by alcohol and emotions, Lee suddenly kisses Ju. Ju quietly points out that Lee was the one who made the first move, leaving both of them caught in a confusing moment where hatred, guilt, and growing feelings begin to collide.
The emotional tension between them continues as they share a deeply personal moment.
The next morning, Prosecutor Ju wakes up and realizes that both he and Lee are lying in bed without their clothes. The memory of the previous night leaves him feeling conflicted. He quietly watches Lee sleeping until Lee's abusive uncle starts calling his phone. Without waking Lee, Ju rejects the call, turns off the phone, gets dressed, and heads to the office. Instead of starting work, he visits his friend Prosecutor Yoon and asks for a favor. He explains that Lee's uncle runs a small laundry business and wants Yoon to secretly gather evidence against him. Yoon is surprised because Ju has never targeted someone over a personal matter before. Ju admits that the man hurt someone very important to him, and he intends to make him pay. Before Yoon can ask who that person is, Lee calls, and Ju leaves without answering. Outside, Ju scolds Lee for not showing up at work. Lee apologizes, saying he overslept and his phone was turned off. Ju dismisses the excuse and orders him to skip the office and go straight to the latest crime scene where Hanul is already waiting. After the call ends, Lee blushes in embarrassment as memories of their intimate night together flood his mind. At the crime scene, Lee asks Hanul whether they found the murder weapon, but Hanul says the knife is still missing. They discuss possible motives, including life insurance and revenge. Hanul worries about the victim's young son and wonders how the child will cope if he learns his own mother murdered his father. Lee decides they must focus on finding the missing knife and splits up to search for more evidence. Outside, Lee notices the little boy secretly watching him. When he calls the child over, the boy explains that he returned only to collect his favorite toy because he and his mother are about to leave on a long trip. Shocked, Lee asked where they're going, but before the boy can answer, his mother rushes over angrily and demands to know why Lee is questioning her son. She insists that her husband's friend was the real killer and refuses to listen to anything else. Hanul soon arrives and gently leads the child away before telling Lee that the victim had a life insurance policy worth $100,000. Back at the office, Ju immediately asks whether they found the knife. After hearing no, he orders Hanul to obtain a search warrant for the wife's home as quickly as possible. He also tells him to ask the police to leave the crime scene and begin tracking the woman's location before she disappears. Although Hanul worries the local officers will be angry, Lee agrees with Ju, saying they can't risk letting the suspect escape. Hanul jokes that Lee is starting to sound exactly like Prosecutor Ju. Before they can continue, Director Tuck briefly stops by to speak with Lee. After he leaves, Hanul accidentally spills coffee all over Lee's shirt and apologizes. Ju sends Hanul to get cleaning supplies, then quietly begins unbuttoning Lee's stained shirt himself. A startled Lee asked what he's doing, but Ju calmly says he's only helping. Embarrassed, Lee apologizes for what happened between them the night before, blaming it on the alcohol. Ju interrupts him and says he wasn't talking about that. Instead, he asked whether Lee has decided to reopen Gi Young's case. Lee finally agrees to reinvestigate his father's past. Ju then unexpectedly admits that nothing they did the previous night was a drunken mistake. He says he acted intentionally before coldly claiming that Lee is nothing more than his sex partner. The harsh words deeply hurt Lee, but before he can respond, Hanul returns. Ju tells Lee to change into one of his spare shirts before handing him important documents about Gi Young's case. He asks Lee to review the information and give his honest opinion, while also obtaining the search warrant. Moments later, they learn the suspect's location has been tracked. Ju and Lee rush to a remote forest, believing the suspect may be hiding there. Lee worries she could even harm her own son, but Ju believes she's too focused on escaping with the insurance money. As they search, Ju teases Lee about getting tired and even jokes about helping improve his stamina, making Lee blush. When Ju notices Lee shivering, he offers his coat, but Lee awkwardly refuses. Soon, they find an abandoned cabin and hide nearby to wait. Lee repeatedly tries to keep his distance, but Ju keeps moving closer. Suddenly, something falls from above, and Ju instinctively shields Lee. Lee quietly asks if Ju was worried about him. Ju immediately denies having any emotional feelings and warns Lee not to misunderstand his actions. Lee playfully asks if Ju is simply caring for his partner, causing Ju to tease him again. Before their conversation could continue, the suspect arrives. They watch as she digs into the ground and pulls out the missing knife. She appears ready to take her own life, but Ju and Lee rush out to stop her. The woman completely loses control, screaming for them to stay away before slashing Ju's hand with the knife. She then charges toward him.
For a brief moment, Ju freezes as terrifying memories of his father's murder flash before his eyes. Seeing the danger, Lee jumps in front of him without thinking and takes the attack himself, sacrificing his own safety to protect Ju.
After Lee is injured while protecting Prosecutor Ju rushes him to the hospital and blames himself for what happened. When Lee finally comes out with his arm bandaged, Ju angrily asks if he's out of his mind and demands to know why he would risk his life like that. Lee quietly replies that he only wanted to keep Ju from getting hurt. Ju tells him he should think about himself first, because one person has already caused enough pain in his life and he shouldn't let anyone else hurt him. Even then, Lee's first concern is the suspect and her young son. Ju assures him the woman has been taken into custody and the boy is safe, before insisting on driving Lee home to rest. Later, Lee keeps receiving calls from his abusive uncle, but he ignores them. His uncle even sends a message complaining that Prosecutor Yoon is investigating his business and begging for help, but Lee simply turns off his phone. Remembering Ju's strange behavior, Lee jokingly thinks Ju is completely crazy, while admitting he isn't much better himself. The following morning, Lee excitedly tells Ju that drugs were found in Jaeon's blood. He believes if the drugs match those found in Kim's body, they can finally arrest her. Ju reminds him that Kim's body is missing, making a direct comparison impossible. As they continue talking, an elderly man suddenly arrives at the office and shocks everyone by confessing that he killed Kim. Neither Ju nor Lee believes the confession. Ju suspects it's all part of another plan to protect the real culprit, and quickly takes Lee to the hotel where Kim stayed before his death. The hotel manager explains that Kim checked in using Russian identification, even though he looked Korean. On the night of the murder, he left carrying a large suitcase during heavy rain and never returned. The manager gives Ju the room key, allowing them to search the room. While investigating, strange noises from the next room make Lee extremely embarrassed, but Ju calmly reminds him they're there for work, not for anything else. During the search, Lee spots something hidden near the ceiling. As he climbs onto a chair, he almost falls, but Ju quickly catches him. Hidden above them are several packets of illegal drugs. Ju carefully records everything as evidence and orders Lee to send the drugs to the forensic lab immediately. If the drugs match the ones found in Jaeon's blood, they can finally obtain a search warrant. Afterward, Ju suggests grabbing dinner because he's hungry. During the meal, Lee notices Ju barely eats anything and asks if he's worried about him. Ju brushes it off and tells Lee not to think of himself too highly. As they discuss Jaeon's upcoming arrest, Hanel sends Lee a message inviting him to dinner. When Lee casually mentions that Hanel has been taking good care of him lately, Ju suddenly becomes jealous and walks away without saying another word. Lee quickly runs after him. The next day, Lee is surprised to find his uncle waiting outside the office. This time, instead of acting aggressively, his uncle desperately begs for help, explaining that Prosecutor Yoon is investigating his laundry business and someone has reported him. Before Lee can answer, Ju arrives. When the uncle mistakenly thinks Ju is Prosecutor Yoon, Ju corrects him and firmly warns him to stay away from Lee. As the uncle angrily raises his hand again, Ju immediately grabs his wrist and tells him never to come back. Later, Hanel tells Lee that Prosecutor Yoon and Ju became close after Yoon's sister, Soyeon, died while investigating the old Woo-sung case. Hanel then happily invites Lee to lunch and even asks him to watch a movie over the weekend, making it obvious he has feelings for him. Soon after, Lee reports that the drugs found on Kim and Jaeon are an exact match. He also reveals that the gloves recovered from the crime scene are being retested and that a suspicious Russian phone number appeared both near the murder scene and the hotel, even though it has never officially entered Korea. Ju immediately orders a search warrant for Jaeon and decides to work with Prosecutor Yoon because he now believes this entire drug case may be connected to Gil-young's old murder case. Ju later meets Yoon, hands over all the evidence, and says he also wants justice for Soyeon's death. Director Tak unexpectedly joins them, and Ju openly shares the investigation, while quietly asking Tak to make sure Lee stays safe. Meanwhile, Ju and Lee question Jaeon's older sister, Myeon. She reveals that Jaeon had been using drugs for years and once became pregnant by her high school boyfriend. Her father forced her to have an abortion and tried separating the couple after learning that the boyfriend had murdered his own sister. When Jaeon fought back, her father cut her out of his will, destroying their family.
Just then, the forensic lab calls with shocking news. The DNA evidence matches none other than Director Talk. Hearing this, both Ju and Lee are left completely speechless, realizing the truth may be far more dangerous than they ever imagined.
After learning the shocking DNA results, Lee and Prosecutor Ju discuss the case in the car. Lee wonders if Director Talk has been secretly working for Jaeyeon all along, but Ju believes it's more likely that Talk has simply been covering up her mistakes, because love often blinds people. He thinks Kim's death was probably an accident, and Talk only helped hide the body afterward. Lee realizes that love may be the reason Jaeyeon's crimes have stayed hidden for so long. To confirm their suspicions, they visit Director Talk to collect another DNA sample. Talk calmly says he was actually planning to meet Ju himself and suggests transferring Lee to another department because the Jaeyeon case is deeply connected to Gil Young's old murder case, and learning too much could put Lee in danger. Just then, Lee walks in and politely greets them. While pretending to get a drink of water, he secretly takes Talk's used cup so it can be tested for DNA. Later, outside the building, Ju asks if Lee already sent the cup to the forensic lab. Lee confirms that the results will reveal whether Talk was involved in Kim's death. Seeing Ju lost in thought, Lee offers to stay with him, worried that the investigation is becoming too personal. Ju quickly shuts down the idea, telling Lee not to blame himself because none of this is his fault. The following weekend, Lee meets Hanul for the movie they plan to watch. Hanul arrives late, and by then the movie has already started, so he apologizes. Instead of feeling disappointed, Lee smiles and says it isn't a problem. Hanul takes him to an arcade instead, switches off Lee's phone so he can relax, and the two spend the day laughing, playing games, and forgetting about work for a while. After heavy rain begins, they return home completely soaked. As Lee turns his phone back on in the elevator, he's shocked to find dozens of missed calls and messages from Prosecutor Ju. Hanul invites him upstairs for coffee, but Lee politely declines. The moment he steps outside, he finds Ju waiting in the rain. Ju immediately asks why Lee ignored all of his calls. Lee explains that he was spending time with Hanul and simply didn't notice his phone. Jealousy flashes across Ju's face as he asks whether Hanul told him not to answer. Lee denies it, saying they only went out together. Ju coldly tells him to go home and rest, but when Lee reaches for his hand, he pulls away and says not to touch him after touching someone else. He leaves without another word. Only then does Lee realize Ju had been waiting outside for over 3 hours. Feeling guilty, Lee rushes through the rain to Ju's apartment. Ju opens the door, but says he has completely run out of patience after waiting so long. He tells Lee to leave, warning that if he walks inside, he shouldn't blame Ju for what happens next. Ignoring the warning, Lee steps inside anyway. The emotional tension between them finally breaks as Ju pulls Lee close and they share an intense, deeply emotional moment that reveals feelings both of them have been trying to hide. Later, after they calm, Lee quietly dries Ju's hair and explains that he isn't dating Hanul. He even asks if Ju was jealous. Ju avoids answering and simply tells Lee to get some sleep. He hands Lee sleeping pills, admitting that he also struggles to sleep at night. Before falling asleep, Lee gently asks if Ju is still upset because of Director Talk, but Ju replies that all he wants is the truth. Half asleep, Ju quietly murmurs that maybe Gil Young wasn't the real killer after all. Hearing those words, Lee silently turned toward him, filled with new hope. The next morning, Lee finds Ju already working in his study. Ju lays out all the evidence he has gathered and explains that several mysterious deaths seem connected. Jaeyeon's husband officially died of a heart attack, followed by the death of his doctor. Then, Kim's murder. Each victim was somehow linked to Jaeyeon, and Kim also had an injection mark on his neck. Lee realizes Jaeyeon may be connected to all 3 deaths, but Ju says there is one more case that belongs on the list: Woo-sung's murder. Ju believes everything traces back to the casino. Woo-sung won ownership of the casino shortly before he was killed, while all the blame fell on Gil Young because his DNA was found on the murder weapon. Using their imagination to reconstruct the crime scene, Ju points out an important detail from his childhood memory. His younger self heard the door lock, then 3 separate sounds afterward, meaning someone was already hiding inside the house after Gil Young left. That hidden person likely attacked Woo-sung repeatedly with an owl as an act of revenge. Now they have 2 mysteries to solve: who else knew the house password, and how Gil Young's DNA ended up on the murder weapon. Just then, the forensic lab calls with another shocking discovery. The DNA found on the gloves doesn't match Director Talk. It matches his son instead.
The revelation leaves both Ju and Lee speechless because it proves Jaeyeon never had the abortion everyone believes she did. She secretly gave birth to a son, and Director Tak has been hiding him all these years. After reviewing the evidence, Lee suggests that Jaeyeon's husband may have discovered she had been pregnant before their marriage. He believes the husband and the elderly doctor were trying to uncover the truth. But once Jaeyeon found out, she murdered them both only a few days apart to keep her secret hidden. Prosecutor Ju agrees and adds that after Jaeyeon killed Kim, her hidden son may have secretly moved Kim's body to cover up the crime. Ju immediately orders Lee to obtain an arrest warrant as quickly as possible. Soon, Jaeyeon is brought in for questioning, but she refuses to cooperate. Spoiled by her wealthy upbringing and protected by money and influence, she simply laughs and answers every question by saying she knows nothing. Frustrated, Ju leaves the interrogation room knowing she won't confess so easily. Lee wonders why Ju didn't question her about Director Tak or her secret son, but Ju explains that doing so would only give Director Tak a chance to take all the blame and let Jaeyeon escape. Jaeyeon casually asks for a cigarette, acting as if the investigation doesn't concern her at all. Later, Lee goes to buy a drink, where Hanul kindly pays for it and gently asks about the case. Lee avoids answering, making Hanul realize he doesn't fully trust him anymore. At the same time, Ju meets Prosecutor Yoon and reveals the shocking truth about Director Tak and Jaeyeon's hidden son. Yoon is stunned because the case has become far more complicated than anyone expected. Ju encourages him by saying that solving such a major case could even earn him a promotion. Meanwhile, Hanul teasingly asks Lee if he's dating Prosecutor Ju, since they spend so much time together. Embarrassed, Lee quickly denies it and insists he would never date someone from work. Just then, Ju and Yoon arrive, and Yoon jokes that someone in the office must have caught Lee's attention. Before Lee can respond, Ju quietly takes the drink Hanul bought and drinks it himself. Clearly jealous, he reminds Lee never to accept drinks from strangers, before directly asking if he has been dating Hanul. Lee denies it again, but Ju walks away, unable to hide his jealousy. Lee follows him, but before they can continue talking, they notice Jaeyeon smoking nearby. Lee immediately realizes it isn't an ordinary cigarette, and Ju understands exactly what he means. They bring Jaeyeon back for another interrogation. Before entering, Ju praises Lee for his sharp observation. During the questioning, they secretly monitor Jaeyeon's reactions with a lie detection device. Ju first shows her Kim's photo, but she confidently claims she has never seen him before. The detector instantly reveals she is lying. Ju deliberately pressures her with more questions until she begins losing control. He then shows an old college photo of her with Director Tak and reveals that Kim's body was actually moved by her son. For the first time, Jaeyeon looks genuinely shocked, as if she never expected that secret to be discovered. Furious, she suddenly attacks Ju, but Lee and the others rush in and pull her away before she can hurt him. Ju immediately orders prosecutors to charge her for attacking a public official. Outside, Lee asks if Ju is all right, but Ju simply says he's relieved that Lee wasn't the one who got hurt. Yoon reminds them that knowing the truth isn't enough, because they still need solid evidence to prove every crime in court. Ju agrees and tells everyone it's time to work even harder. Later, that night, Ju notices Lee still working alone at the office. Lee admits he feels a little sorry for Jaeyeon because she lost the man she loved and had to hide her own son for years. Ju calmly tells him that sympathy can't replace facts and reminds him that their job is to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it may be. As they prepare to leave, Jaeyeon suddenly appears and loudly reveals the secret both men have been hiding. She tells Lee that he is the son of Gil Young, the man accused of murder, and then exposes Ju's biggest secret by revealing that he is actually Woo Song's son, who changed his name after his father's death. She claims Ju only got close to Lee to take revenge. Lee stands there in complete shock, unable to say a single word, before quietly turning around and walking away.
Lee is completely heartbroken after hearing Jaeyeon's shocking revelation. As he walks away with tears in his eyes, every strange thing Prosecutor Ju has ever said or done suddenly makes sense. Ju chases after him, desperately asking Lee to listen because things are not what they seem. But Lee coldly asks if there is even anything left to explain. He reminds Ju that he once asked why he was so obsessed with reopening the case, and now he finally understands the truth. Lee believes everything was part of Ju's plan from the very beginning, reopening the investigation, earning his trust, and even becoming emotionally close to him, all seemed like carefully planned moves to manipulate him into proving Gil-young's innocence before crushing him. Ju admits that the closer they became, the harder it was to tell Lee the truth, because he knew revealing his identity would make Lee leave forever. Lee bitterly replies that they never had a real relationship to begin with, so nothing could truly be broken. Ju tries one last time, explaining that he planned to tell Lee everything after proving his father's innocence. But Lee asks what would have happened if the evidence had confirmed Gil-young was really guilty. Ju quietly admits that he once wanted revenge, but after meeting Lee, those feelings slowly disappeared because he genuinely fell in love with him. As Lee walks away again, Ju apologizes for every mistake he made. Lee sadly apologizes as well, saying he should have apologized long ago for the pain his father's case caused Ju and his family. Ju asks Lee to at least look at him, but Lee says every time Ju sees his face, he'll only remember the tragedy that destroyed both of their lives. Ju gently reminds him that they have both suffered enough and begs Lee to escape that living nightmare together. But Lee silently pulls away and leaves. Back home, Lee breaks down in tears on the floor, while outside, Ju sits alone crying as well. Whatever his original intentions were, he now truly loves Lee and can't bear seeing him hurt. From the next day on, Ju throws himself into the investigation alone. During the search, he discovers a suspicious injection and immediately sends photos to the forensic lab, asking whether it could cause a delayed death that might have been mistaken for a heart attack. He also recovers the elderly doctor's old phone and asks Hunnell to repair it for more evidence. Later, Ju secretly searches Director Talk's office, where he finds another hidden injection along with a card connected to an orphanage. Prosecutor Yoon joins him, and together they realize that if Talk grew up in an orphanage, he may have been given a different last name. Yoon also reveals another shocking discovery. His sister was murdered by one of Director Talk's own associates to stop her investigation. He also informs Ju that Lee will soon be suspended from duty, while Ju promises to obtain an arrest warrant for Talk as soon as possible. That night, Lee is asleep when he suddenly feels someone inside his apartment. Pretending to get water, he secretly calls Ju, but before he can escape, Director Talk attacks him and demands that Ju cancel the arrest warrant. Lee bravely tells Talk to surrender instead, but Talk tightens his grip around Lee's neck. Just in time, Ju bursts in, pulls Talk away, and saves Lee. Talk tries to manipulate Ju by claiming Lee is only using him because he's Gil-young's son. But Ju snaps in anger and punches him, blaming Talk for ruining both of their lives. Moments later, the police arrive and arrest Talk. After everything settles down, Lee gently treats the injuries on Ju's hands and asks if he's all right. Instead of answering, Ju checks the bruises on Lee's neck and quietly tells him to leave the investigation because involving him was the biggest mistake he ever made. As he hugs Lee tightly, Ju admits that somewhere along the way, Lee became his greatest weakness. Lee asks if Ju regrets loving him, but before Ju can answer, Lee places a hand over his mouth and softly confesses that he loves him. Ju smiles through tears and admits that although he once wanted revenge, he only ended up hurting himself because he couldn't stop falling in love with Lee. Lee wipes away Ju's tears and says he'd rather carry guilt beside the person he loves than live happily without him. Ju gently asks Lee to kiss him, and after they share an emotional kiss, Lee nervously asks if it is meant to be a goodbye. Ju quietly reveals that Talk somehow learned about tomorrow's arrest warrant, even though only Hunnell and Prosecutor Yoon knew about it. Realizing there may still be a traitor among them, Lee wonders if one of them could secretly be Talk's son. Ju tells Lee to stay safe no matter what happens next, and Lee promises he will before giving Ju one more heartfelt kiss. The next day, Prosecutor Ju and Lee question director Tak once again. This time, Tak finally admits that he never intended to kill Kim. According to him, Kim kept demanding higher payments for the drugs and even attacked Jaeon, making Tak lose control. In a fit of rage, he injected Kim in the neck, which caused his death. Ju then accuses Tak of also murdering Jaeon's husband and the elderly doctor, but Tak firmly denies those crimes. Trying to break his composure, Ju lies and claims they recovered all the data from the doctor's phone, saying the evidence points directly to Tak. Even then, Tak refuses to confess. Ju changes tactics and asks about Tak's son, but Tak immediately cuts him off, insisting he has no son. Ju then asks where the murder weapon used to kill Woo-song is hidden. Tak casually replies that Gil-yong killed Woo-song, but Ju firmly says they both know that isn't the truth anymore. After the interrogation, Ju, Lee, Prosecutor Yoon, and Hanil discuss the investigation together. Ju announces that Kim's murder case is officially solved now that Tak has been arrested. Yoon asks what they will do about the 7-year-old Woo-song case. Ju admits they have almost no evidence left, but says they still have to reopen it because clearing Gil-yong's name is the only way to reduce Lee's suspension. Ju also asks Hanil if he found anything useful on the doctor's repaired phone, but Hanil claims there was nothing important. He casually adds that an unknown investigator's DNA was found among Tak's belongings. Ju says they'll discuss everything later that afternoon. Since it is Lee's last official day before suspension, Yoon wishes him luck. Ju quietly tells Lee to continue working from home because he can't solve the case without him. Lee worries that secretly working together could cause trouble if anyone finds out, but Ju promises their plan will remain between the four of them. As Ju and Lee leave together, Ju says they have already set the trap, and now all they can do is wait for the real culprit to make the first move. Lee promises he will continue helping from home and says he still believes they can uncover the complete truth. Ju isn't so optimistic because 7 years have passed, making it unlikely the real murder weapon still exists. On the drive home, Ju asks what Lee is thinking about. Lee says he feels sorry for Tak and Jaeon's abandoned son because both parents used him and then threw him away. Ju smiles sadly and says Lee's kindness is exactly why he can even feel sympathy for his enemies. After arriving home, Ju carefully checks every door, window, and security lock because he's terrified someone might attack Lee again. Lee tells Ju he shouldn't have closed Kim's case so quickly, but Ju says the past no longer matters as much as protecting the person he loves now. He admits after everything they've been through, his biggest fear is losing Lee, and he quietly hugs him. A little later, Prosecutor Yoon calls Lee saying a witness has appeared in the elderly doctor's case and asks Lee to come to the office because he's busy. Lee immediately leaves. At the same time, Ju visits Yoon's sister's memorial. Suddenly, he remembers Tak often visiting the same place. Suspicious, Ju searches the ashes and discovers the missing awl hidden inside the urn. Just then, the forensic lab calls with shocking news. The DNA from the gloves perfectly matched the DNA found on Tak's belongings, and after comparing it with everyone in the office, they identify the owner as Hanil. At the same moment, Lee also realizes that the masked man seen during Kim's murder was actually Hanil, proving he is Tak's hidden son. Unfortunately, Hanil captures Lee before he can escape. Ju repeatedly tries calling Lee, but Lee accidentally left his phone at home. Hanil drags Lee to the rooftop and orders him to jump. Hoping to buy time, Lee keeps talking until Hanil finally breaks down and reveals the truth. He says his own parents abandoned him when he was young, only calling him back whenever they needed help committing crimes. They even forced him to stay close to Prosecutor Ju and secretly report everything he learned. Hanil bitterly asks how Lee can still believe in happiness after living through so much pain. Lee promises he'll speak to Ju and try to help him, but Hanil refuses to listen. When Lee pushes him away to create an opening, Hanil angrily attacks him with a knife. Just then, Ju rushes onto the rooftop. Hanil turns toward Ju, but once again, Lee throws himself in front of him and takes the stab instead. Ju immediately shoves Hanil away and catches the badly injured Lee in his arms. Crying helplessly, Ju desperately calls Lee's name while begging for an ambulance to arrive quickly. Later, Lee lies unconscious in a hospital bed, while Ju sits beside him, holding his hand and praying through tears. A few days later, Ju stands alone by the beach watching the news.
The report confirms that Jaeon, Director Tak, and Hanel have all been arrested, and after the investigation was officially reopened, Gil-yeon's name has finally been cleared, proving he was innocent all along. Feeling a huge weight lifted from his heart, Ju smiles for the first time in years. Just then, Lee walks up beside him. The two quietly thank each other for never giving up during the darkest moments of their lives. Finally free from the pain of the past, Ju asks Lee if he would like to go on a real date. Lee happily says yes, and the two share a heartfelt kiss as the story comes to a warm and emotional ending.